Hey y'all, back with another AS boss guide, this time for 3.4. As always, feel free to skip to any of the timestamps in the description. There's also a Google form if you'd like to submit your own clears, which will be recorded in the spreadsheet down below. With all that said, let's get right into it. This AS rotation is about as straightforward as it gets. Raw damage checks on both sides, with Reaver favoring AoE, and Doomsday Beast more so blasting single target. During Reaver's summon phase, you will occasionally summon complete vessels, which you'll want to kill for extra turns. And as for Doomsday Beast, you'll want to make sure to focus its hands to break them, then go for the engine head. As for the buffs, upon break, allies recover from any CC and regain all their skill points, perfect for SP-hungry characters like Archer, Kafka, and E0 Firefly to name just a few. Realistically though, this list is a lot longer due to how Flame Reaver in particular works. Ultimates are also fully refreshed, so ult-centric characters like Saber, Fei Xiao, and Acheron get a second wind. Not to mention energy-focused characters like Sunday and Tingyun give more energy on top of that energy, and RMC basically gets a guaranteed mem advance between the charge gain and refunding another ult. Skills also get a 25% foam boost, so skill spammers like the Herda, Jing Liu, and Anaxos, to name just a few, will get a nice boost here. As for stage-specific buffs, Bold Leader is just the go-to buff. Getting 60% unconditional damage bonus for any character is ridiculous already, but refunding 1 SP per every 4 used on top of that is even better. In fact, it straight up outclasses the no turning back buff, which provides 20% less damage and no SP refund, with the minimal upside of working on as many HP drainers you can fit onto the team, which you usually want to be 1 to 2. Sure, Hyacinth's S1 exists and makes this buff with her more worth, but she's SP hungry too, saturates on damage percent, and still only outputs sub DPS levels worth of damage, despite what you may have seen. This means that besides Bold Leader, the only other buff you'd want to consider is Tarsus Infection for DOT specifically, which provides 6 energy to an ally every DOT day trigger, and boosts DOT res pen by 30%. Kafka loves this buff and can abuse it to optimal effect, especially after her own kit buffs, and I expect other DOT units in tandem with her, including Hysolens potentially in the future, to do the same. Here's the buff breakdown on side 1 for the user-submitted results. Shout out to the 2 DOT mains for their shocking presence on this list. Side 2 follows side 1 in that the first buff is also overwhelmingly the best. 50% skill and ult damage for no cost is great. I guess this is the Finon buff, but it's also so overwhelmingly generic that even Fei Xiao usually prefers to run this buff over the follow-up attack specific one. Hunter Stride is the break buff, providing 25% advance forward per break. Note that this can stack, and also that Fugue's Exo Toughness counts as its own break proc. From the forum submissions, 8 Fireflies and 2 Boot Hills ran this buff, so that should tell you who this is meant for. Turn of Luck makes its return after literally 0 rotations, providing the exact same 15% follow-up attack res pen and 50% colorless break. Honestly, with Doomsday Beast having 40 to 60% imaginary res, Adventuring's follow-ups doing negligible single target toughness across 3 targets, and Fei Xiao having both element matchup and colorless break, this is really just a Cypher buff. Moza can also use it I guess, but 40% lightning res isn't ideal for his damage either. Here's the buff breakdown for side 2 for the user-submitted results. Still a clear winner, but a bit more evenly split. As for boss stats, Reaver is one of our squishier entries, with only 2.42 million HP per phase. This is relevant because with less than 10 million HP total, or 5 million per phase after factoring in Safeguard's 50% damage reduction, certain characters with enough vertical investment can just kill him outright. He has 300 toughness twice per phase, which actually discourages breaking it via normal means. Though, as we'll soon see, that isn't really an issue outside of break teams, which are also screwed in other ways. He's also quite fast with 174.24 speed, and has 40% effect res and 75% res to freeze, entanglement, and imprisonment. So unless your name is Anaxa, you aren't stopping him in his tracks. If you're going for a sustainless speedrun, 3942 is your score to aim for, as that's when Reaver takes his first turn. And what does he do in this turn? Well, he spawns 4 vessels, 2 to his left and 2 to his right, which are very squishy but have 120 toughness. Yeesh, talking about anti-break measures. Killing all 4 depletes 75 toughness each, adding up very nicely to the 300 toughness damage you need to initiate his Shackle Shatter state. In Shackle Shatter, his second toughness bar is unlocked, he leaves the field until next turn, and continuously spawns 4 vessels. Each vessel kill deletes 10.5% or 32 of his toughness, besides every third vessel, which has 30% of the original HP. Killing this vessel will instead grant the ally who killed it a 1-turn, 50% damage buff and an extra turn, functionally identical to Sela's Resurgence. In other words, buffs do not take down, you cannot ult, and your character's turn counts as having elapsed, so they can still move up in the action order. Before Shackle Shatter, he just repeats the attack patterns of his MOC self. Turn 1 has him perform Demise's Storm, a blast attack for 900 and 300 to adjacent targets respectively, followed by Fading Fate, an AoE attack for 600 that inflicts Corrosion. To review, in Phase 1, this Corrosion status lets you heal 60% of all damage taken, or 80% in Phase 2, and sticks around as long as you have damage to heal. Healing it off grants a 30% damage buff for the next attack, and you can heal 20% of your current Corrosion HP per enemy hit. Reaver's turn 2, or the latest turn you'll usually see before Shackle Shatter, has him perform Roads Mingled, where he assigns 2 vessels to copy Demise's Storm, and the other 2 to Fading Fate, if available. He then immediately follows up with Underworld's Grief, having him and the 2 other clones to copy Demise's Storm at 1/6 of the original damage. Turn 3 is Underworld's Grief once more, but this time for Fading Fate, followed by Demise's Storm to spawn 2 more vessels and rinse and repeat. These vessels, like their MOC counterparts, don't actually move at all. That is until Shackle Shatter, where they act extremely fast like their pure fiction counterparts. The first wave of vessels will perform single target attacks at 15, 20, 25, and 30 AV respectively, with all subsequent vessels on the left acting at 15 AV, and all vessels on the right acting at 20 AV, unless they're complete vessels, which always act at 25 AV. All of them perform single target attacks for a measly 500 damage, and then attack again 100 AV later. Everyone besides the complete vessel, who disappears after attacking and adds 1 Calamity power to the main Reaver instead. You'll really want perfect timing for this section, as saving your action advancers or timing DPS turns to kill the complete vessels and gain a cascade of extra turns is pivotal to speedrunning this fight. So what is Calamity power exactly? Well, Reaver starts with 6 or 8 of it during Phase 1 or 2 respectively. Killing a vessel subtracts 1 Calamity power, and unique to this fight, Reaver gets immediately advanced when this count hits 0. Upon his next action, which is otherwise delayed by 50%, Reaver then performs But Suffering is Essential in Phase 1, or Cry Not for Discarded in Phase 2. These are both AoE attacks that scale with Calamity power, wipe all vessels in the process, and cause him to reappear on field until his next turn. Honestly, if you bring the right matchup, this nuke is trivial or non-existent, and if you bring the wrong matchup, well, Reaver will very kindly take you to the restart button and show you why that matchup is wrong. Besides the absolute AoE goats in the Herta and Anaxa, believe it or not, and the absolute bottom tier picks in Break and certain single target units, Reaver is honestly an anomaly. While most units will be hardlocked to scoring 3942 in sustainless variants, a lot of them are capable of reaching that so long as they have sufficient AoE. Heck, even Jingliu can do it, though if you fail, that 5% max HP drain of hers basically means guaranteed death. As such, I'll only be mentioning a couple standouts for this list. Silver Wolf needs your E1 to feel like a competent DPS, but having your single target ult multipliers buffed to AoE, and having guaranteed 1-turn ults even on attack rope with E1 makes her a top choice versus this mode. Extra turns bypass the turn limit that Memo sprites are allowed to stick around for, letting casters' Netherwing infinitely claw swipe and even perform 1 breath attack with Hyacine's help, and even lets little Ika go on a rampage without expiring its turns, should you embrace Wheelchair fully and make it the DPS. With the energy buff provided this AS, Kafka actually has the potential to infinite loop DOT triggers with Tutorial. Black Swan is absolutely dependent on Kafka for this purpose, though honestly Kafka doesn't need her if you're crazy enough. With enough vertical investment, the Herta, Anaxa, Archer, Phynon can just delete Reaver's existence, with Phynon uniquely being able to advance Reaver turns forward and potentially unlock Shackle Shatter earlier. Being balanced around Resurgence, and also being a single target unit, Sela unfortunately doesn't quite benefit from it as much as one would hope, but she can still do pretty well. As for sustains, the best sustain is none at all, besides Castris, who wants Hyacine for dragon looping. But if you can't hit the damage threshold, then Hyacine provides her own DPS, Huohuo provides team-wide energy and attack, and Gallagher provides SP and his usual array of benefits, though his healing is significantly weaker because Reaver disappears and his vessels aren't meant to stick around. As for Linxia, she's pretty much exclusively for Jade and the Herta teams, Aventurine offers a small advantage for follow-up, and Fu Xuan has a small crit rate buff. Luocha, Bailu, and Japard are your usual sustains, and Lynx, Natasha, and March are your less than usual sustains. Not much else to really say about them, especially since Reaver lacks any hard CC. As for supports, this is an AoE game mode, so of course Tribby reigns supreme. However, with ults refreshing and AV not resetting upon each break, RMC's unique advantage of a guaranteed mem advance with each break makes their skill set uniquely valuable. Sunday and Robin are both strong advancers, with Sunday's energy giving ult allowing for some double dipping, and Mei has some pretty solid perma-amp, though her weakness break efficiency is sadly a bit wasted here. Supports with turn-based buffs, while a bit more niche, also love the fact that extra turns are the name of the game versus Reaver. For the first time ever, Yukong is genuinely great, with their buffs on par with E0 Robin's and uniquely weighted on crit rate. She does need an E6 to function properly, but the fact that she can sidegrade the amp of limited harmonies while still freeing up your harmony for the other side definitely deserves mention. As for Sparkle, she'll definitely be seeing more use now that her best in slot DPS has arrived, and really love that 4 SP per ult that she provides. Nihilities also aren't bad here, especially when paired with Acheron, and Cypher even being able to stand on her own, with Xiao Cho even having some niche use cases with Kafka while we wait for another dedicated DOT unit on the horizon. That being said, the fact that a lot of good Nihility light cones provide damage amp on hit sucks against its forced single ally pure fiction scenario. Silver Wolf's improved AoE uptime is greatly appreciated, though, and this is crazy to say, you're probably just better DPSing with her. Asta and Hanya are low budget alternatives, and honestly don't even consider bringing break supports or single target debuffers if you want to pass. Alrighty, with Reaver out of the way, let's look at Doomsday Beast, or as I like to call it, a pure damage race. It's got a shared total of about 2.2 million HP shared across a bulkier engine, and 2 hands with Safeguard. In other words, 50% damage reduction when not broken, and double the damage while broken. Each of these hands has 100 toughness, with 20% res to the other's exclusive element, 40% res to lightning and the other's attacking element, which you can figure out based on the color of the number that shows up when you take damage, purple being quantum and yellow being imaginary, and 60% res to their own attacking element. The engine, meanwhile, shares a 40% lightning res and has 60% res to both imaginary and quantum. So yeah, those elements will be fighting an uphill battle versus this boss. Killing their hands transfers their weaknesses to the main engine, which actually starts off with no visible weaknesses, and killing all 3 breaks the beast, leaving it about 1.563 million HP boss with 20 res left to go to town on. Unlike Reaver, which can be an axe to cheese, Doomsday Beast is completely CC immune, though it only has 30% effect res versus the usual 40% for bosses. And while all 3 parts act slowly at 118.8 speed, they are staggered at the start of each phase, with the right hand moving first, followed closely by the engine in phase 1, and then in phase 2, the engine acts immediately, followed by the left hand sometime after. The key mechanic to this fight, if you can call it that, is infusions. The right hand inflicts imaginary infusion, while the left hand inflicts quantum infusion, corresponding to their attacking elements. Hitting the corresponding hand while you have its matching infusion removes it from your character, and as a bonus, the attack in question gains 50% weakness break efficiency versus that hand only, and deals toughness to it regardless of element. Breaking these hands sets their next AV to happen after a fixed 100% delay, so there's a good incentive to do so if you can. Stacking 2 of the same infusions doesn't do anything, but if a character receives both infusions, they are snare locked with a 100% base chance to successfully proc. Snare Lock combines a 10% speed down from imprisonment and the minus 50% delay and detonation damage per hit received from entanglement. Before we move on to the hand's attacks patterns though, it's important to note that Doomsday Beast is capable of inflicting both of these infusions, as we'll see soon enough. Both hands have 3 different attack variations corresponding to their buff levels. At base, the right hand does a single target attack for about 1700. Buff level 1 increases that attack damage to 1850 and adds quantum infusion to the hit character, and buff level 2 repeats that exact same attack on a different character. Left hand does an AoE sweep for 1000 on base, with buff level 1 inflicting 2 random imaginary infusions, and buff level 2 and higher increasing the damage from 1000 to 1150, and the number of imaginary infusions from 2 to 3. Not very threatening on their own, but that's where the engine comes in. On phase 1, the engine opens with Calamity Strike, buffing the left hand by +1 level, followed by Doomsday Curse, which inflicts 2 imaginary and 2 quantum infusions randomly across the party. Note that if the target has 1 infusion, then Doomsday Curse will always inflict the opposite infusion to attempt to snare lock the target. meaning that under the right circumstances, it can actually inflict 3 or even 4 of a single infusion and 1 or 0 of the other. Turn 2 is Void Fission, which buffs the right hand by +1 level, followed by another Doomsday Curse. Turn 3 is Total Annihilation, a single target attack that deals 1700 damage, followed by yet another Doomsday Curse. From my observations, the Total Annihilation also syncs up both hands' actions this phase, making the follow-up from this turn the real deadly part about it. Rinse and repeat this cycle for Phase 1. Phase 2 opens instead with Engine Boost, which buffs both hands' levels by 1 and heals them. Since the HP of the Broken Beast is determined by how much HP the engine and hands take, this means that you can technically reduce the Broken Beast's HP below the 41% threshold of 1.563 million, an honestly very nice interaction since most units don't attack or act before 0 AV, and you'd want to save these attacks for the Broken Beast anyway, since that beast receives 100% bonus damage. This action is followed by Total Annihilation again, and another Doomsday Curse. Turn 2 is Mass Infection and AoE for 1400 damage, and once again, say it with me, another Doomsday Curse. It then charges up its AoE nuke, and until it uses it on turn 3, the hands are actually disabled from attacking. Thanks 1.0 inspired boss design. As for that turn 3 nuke, it's a single move, Impending Doom, an AoE for about 2150 that applies the same logic infusions as, no prize for guessing, Doomsday Curse. As for the overall theme of this fight, it just gets more and more dangerous over time, so you're best off breaking and killing this boss ASAP. Yeah, not really that interesting since that's what you want to do anyways. As for Doomsday Beast's best counters, honestly you can treat this fight like an MOC floor. Blast is technically ideal as it's versus 3 targets, but single target and sufficiently high AoE nukers are also great. On the whole, Wind DPS reigns supreme with Anaxa again, Fei Xiao and our newly introduced Saber topping the charts. Finon and Firefly also do great, with Firefly's Blast Break DPS perfectly matching the damage profile of this fight. Both also have ult states that don't play well with 100% action advanced supports though, so do keep in mind that they may not have as insane ceilings as the other DPS on this list. Archer has it rougher, with the 40 to 60% quantum res versus this fight, but as a new king of single target, plus his natural synergy with Silver Wolf who provides massive amounts of res down, you'd be forgiven for not realizing he's technically at a type disadvantage. Boothill has issues with ramp up time, but once his pocket trick shots are fully loaded, he's good to go. And jumping closer to the bottom, Himiko appreciates the 3 elite format of this fight, giving her tons of follow-ups to work with. That being said, her single target is lacking, so, especially at lower investment, she might have problems with closing out the fight after you break. With everyone else, just kind of pick whichever DPS can output the most damage on your account. Iacine is once again our best sustain, though this time I'd like to say her competition is a bit closer. Lynx's AoE fire toughness and break support is much more relevant versus a fire weak and break friendly boss. Huohuo has great offensive synergy with Saber and the few sustained Finon players out there, among others. Fu Xuan has refreshable AoE CC prevention. Gallagher and Aventurine can shrug off CCs to keep their team protected, with Gallagher having the toughness advantage and Aventurine having the follow-up synergy advantage. Luocha and Lynx are generally solid healers, the former much more so than the latter, though the latter also has an AoE cleanse while the former is only single target. And as for the rest of the sustains, well, use at your own discretion. With the fight being a single target favorable as it is though, Robin stands on top. Ranmei isn't far behind though, since this is also a great fight for 2 out of the 3 break DPS. Sorry Rappa. Cypher has great toughness that can be made consistent with the Turn of Luck buff, plus synergy with Fei Xiao. That being said, her higher speed, more SP positive playstyle, and more general and powerful buffs put her significantly above Topaz. Silver Wolf's implant automatically transferring to another unit upon death, plus her newly AoE defense down, makes her absolutely broken as a single target amper, and Tribi is Tribi versus a 3 target fight. Sunday has strong buffs, though not wanting to attack ever puts him at more infusion risk compared to all the other supports. Big enough of a problem to note, not enough of a problem to not make him best in slot for your average hyper carry teams. As mentioned before, Fugue doubling the amount of breaks on field when there's an AS buff providing 25% advance forward per break is really strong, and her exo breaks add a nice bit of front-loaded damage to finish off each broken phase. In tandem with Harmony MC, your break DPS can end up hitting like a semi-truck, But interestingly, if you can afford the SP, Bronya will be slightly better due to allowing for faster breaks. Xiaoqiu is just here if you like to use Acheron, same for Pella, though providing on-element toughness is nice, as is the case with Topaz. Sparkle Ting Yun and Bronya have their own niches with Archer and low AV clears respectively, but they excel there. Hanya and Asta are once again your usual low-budget alternatives. Moza is pretty awkward versus this fight, and Faye much prefers March as a toughness shredding, flexible and target switching sub-DPS. And unless you're running Phynon, Yukong shines much better versus Reaver, where her buffs actually have real uptime. But with that being said, overall this AS is probably one of the simplest fights we've had to date. Reaver's infinite turn exploit is abusable by pretty much any unit with consistent AoE and even some blast units while shutting off single target and break altogether. Meanwhile, Doomsday Beast is almost the exact opposite, falling to any decent blast and single target, break included, with its only gimmick being countered by hitting the threat. In an age where almost every single team member is expected to actively deal damage. Straightforward mechanics, straightforward team assignments, really it's only a problem if you try and drag out the fight, which HSR as a cycle-based game mode has discouraged from the very beginning. Still though, Reaver is much less cheesable for sustained comps, and the fact that it's a newer fight that is borderline impossible for Break to clear does make it the harder of the two, as backed up by the poll I sent out recently. And in light of the recent sustain meta video I made, this new AS rotation, well, half fits. Reaver is actually best handled sustainless, Corrosion providing near permanent damage reduction for not overhealing, Reaver having low enough HP to brute force, and providing enough extra turns, SP, and ults to mow through vessels if your DPS hits the magical 145k damage checkpoint, all provide a massive boost to sustainless runs. Basically, it's everything short of a heal on break, and honestly because of how Corrosion works, I think ults and SP might even be better than that. Doomsday Beast, meanwhile, did receive a 10% attack increase, making sustaining versus them less comfortable than it used to be, but also being a pure damage check means that you can kill them pretty quickly. The fact that this thing received a whopping 210% increase in HP compared to its last rotation, and yet is still considered the easier boss in today's meta, kinda goes to show how much of a non-threat it is. In fact, Reaver is so easy to sustainless that there are a million variations that can hit that magical 3942 number, making 58 AV the new zero cycle equivalent versus this boss. At this point, it just comes down to cost comparisons, uniqueness of supports, and what's available to your account that determines who the best DPS is for you. Sure, it might be frustrating that anything higher is locked behind a paywall and also restricted to specific units, but 1, I think 58 AV is still absurdly high. 2, it allows for interesting situations to be true, like Argenti is just as good for clearing as the Herda at XYZ investment level, down to the exact AV. And 3, low AV runs have always been paywalled. Just take a look at your local E6 2000 AV clear, with Anaxa being the only one to do it with no limited Eidolons against Hule specifically. Personally, my biggest paywall is not having Ranmei's S1 for those hyperspeed Sparkle Archer clears, but for other players I'm sure it's something else, like a crucial Eidolon, or 2 or 5, or maybe some missing speed. All of this though is just a reminder that as much as some of us might try to stay on top of the meta and make our own standards, at the end of the day, Hoyo's the one with the controls. If needed for the sake of balance, they can over double a boss's HP like with Doomsday Beast, or if they want to discourage certain playstyles like Break vs Reaver, they can add constantly spawning 120 toughness summons with 2 to 6 times less HP than an MOC 12 mob. It's not even the first time that Break has been invalidated in Apocalyptic Shadow out of nowhere. AS Bananas straight up invented hit-based breaking, much to the absolute displeasure of Firefly and Boot Hill users out there. Just as in life, the only constant in Honkai Star Rail's meta is change. This rotation may be easy, but just remember, play however makes you happy, whether it's chasing a high score or just clearing. With all that said, thanks for watching, and have a great day.